Thank you all for joining us today. So we have with us today two amazing panelists. We're going to start with Sister Naz Ahmed. Sister Naz is the acting director of CLEAR, based in New York. CLEAR is a wonderful organization that focuses on providing free legal services to communities and movements targeted by national security law enforcement practices. Naz herself focuses on Muslim American discrimination and will be covering in today and tomorrow's workshop what to do in instances like when the FBI knocks on your door, how to handle flying while Muslim discrimination, and other topics. We're very, very lucky to have her with us today here. And with that, I will hand it over.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Masuma, for the introduction, and thank you to Muslim Congress for having me. So as Masuma said, my name is Naz Ahmed. I'm acting director of the CLEAR project at CUNY School of Law. We provide free legal services to communities and movements targeted by so-called national security law enforcement practices. So the focus of today's workshop is going to be what to do if FBI or other police show up at your door to ask you questions. Tomorrow, I'll be going again, and tomorrow we'll be focused on what to do at the airport. And I just realized that I forgot my business cards in my suitcase, so if you need to, I will get them later, but I have them. And we have flyers here that contain the information that we're going to talk about, so if you want to take them with you and share them with other folks. So, just to kind of give background and to make sure that we're all on the same page, how many people here have had or heard of law enforcement visiting people at their homes? Just raise your hands. Okay. So what do you think I mean when I say the word law enforcement? Just shout out an answer.
FBI.
FBI, yes. The police, yes.
Government officials.
Government officials. Anyone else? TSA, yes. Great, yeah, you guys got almost all of them. So these are just an examples of all the different law enforcement agencies that you might come across. We have New York because that's where I'm from. FBI, somebody mentioned. TSA, I think, is on here. Customs and Border Protection, they're the people that you go through customs when you come back from an international travel. So there's lots of different law enforcement. What's important to remember is that the rules, the things that I'm going to talk about today, apply no matter who you're talking to. It doesn't change, so just keep that in mind. So, why do you think law enforcement might question people? You can just shout out an answer. Profiling? Yes, I heard profiling. To speak to somebody about an ongoing investigation. Any other ideas?
They don't like us.
I guess that kind of goes along with profiling. They don't like us. Yeah, what else? Anything else? Travel, they're interested in your travel. Yeah, so there are lots of different reasons that law enforcement might show up at somebody's door and try to question them. They might be investigating a crime. They might think that you know or are involved in criminal activity, but very often, and especially in the communities that we work with, it's just what we call phishing. They're trying to gather information about people, about their experiences, what they know. So to give an example, if you are somebody who's studied in Iran, for example, or you go for Arbaeen a lot, they're going to want to know, oh, what's it like for you when you travel in Iraq? What kinds of people do you meet? Because they're trying to gather information about that part of the world. They're not interested in you as somebody who knows something about criminal activity. They're literally just, they want to suck information out of you. So, why do you think it might be better not to talk to law enforcement without a lawyer present? I've kind of given away the answer. You can shout out an answer. Yes?
Because they're going to use whatever you say against you.
Yes, because they will use whatever you say against you. Any other reasons why you shouldn't talk to law enforcement without a lawyer present? They may incriminate you, yes. So show of hands, how many of you think it's okay for you to lie to law enforcement? And how many of you think it's okay for law enforcement to lie to you? Raise your hands. Yes. So there's a significant power imbalance here, right? You can't lie to law enforcement, they can lie to you. In fact, it's a federal crime to provide false information to a federal government official. So we've talked about potential criminal consequences, right? You can get yourself in trouble if you misremember something and they're looking to use something, and they're looking to prosecute you, or they want to come after you. What are some other potential consequences?
It may impact the whole community.
Yes, that's she said it may impact the whole community. That's great. Insofar as, again, like I said, they may not be interested in you, but they may be interested in what you know about other people, what information you have. So information you share could be used to harm somebody else. Any other potential consequences? One thing to keep in mind is that if you or the person they're asking you about is not a U.S. citizen or doesn't have immigration status in this country, then it can be used in immigration proceedings. So if they ask you, for example, a question about when you first entered the United States and you get the date wrong, and again, and they're really trying to go after you, they can use that to deny you immigration benefits, or they can use that to deny you citizenship, or they can use that information to even sometimes place people into deportation proceedings. And then finally, they're just unknown consequences because we don't know all that they're doing with the information that they have. So that's why it's really important not to speak to law enforcement without a lawyer present. So now I'm going to go over 3 things to do if law enforcement shows up at your door. I'm just going to focus on what to do if they show up at your house today. There are different rules if you're stopped on the street or in your car, but this is the main thing that we help people with, so I want to make sure that you know what to do. So the first one is do not open the door. So you can say things like, show me your ID, or can you slide your business card under the door, or can you leave your business card or phone number? The most important thing is to not open the door. There are only 2 ways that law enforcement can legally enter your home. So one is if they have your permission, what's called consent, or 2, if they have a valid search warrant. Your consent can be not just, oh yes, please come in, or if you've opened the door and they step in, all of a sudden they're inside your house, right? You can ask them to leave, but you don't want to be in that position. You want to be in the position of always having been behind the door. I'm not going to spend too much time on warrants because they can be a little bit confusing, but the main thing to keep in mind with a warrant is that it should be signed by a judge. So sometimes ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they will show up with a document that says, oh, warrant for arrest of alien. And it's not signed by a judge. And you know it's not signed by a judge because the paper says Department of Homeland Security on it, and there's nothing at the bottom that says honorable or anything like that. That is not a paper that requires that you open your door and let them search your house. So the second golden rule, before I move on, any questions about that? Yes?
What if a minor opens the door?
A minor opens the door? Yeah, that's a good question. I think typically, unless they're coming with a search warrant, they're not going to necessarily come into the house until they've spoken to an adult. But that's a good question. In my experience, I would say they don't usually do that. But unless they have a search warrant. And if they're executing a search warrant, they're going to be very aggressive.
Can you go out and talk to them, or?
So the gentleman is asking, can you go out and talk to them? And that's a very good question, a good idea, something we recommend sometimes to people. If they feel like they have to engage with the agent or officer, but they don't want them inside their house, you can step outside the door, close the door behind you, and talk to them outside. I still wouldn't necessarily recommend that. That might be the best way to get a business card or something like that. But yes, that's a great idea. Anything else? Okay, so yes, the second rule, which we've already hammered through, is do not speak to law enforcement without a lawyer present. And you can say this in many different ways. I'm not going to answer any questions without a lawyer present. I don't feel comfortable talking to you without a lawyer present. I'd rather not speak to you without a lawyer present. You might have to repeat yourself, but this is the main thing to remember. And then the third and final one is if you've happened to let them in your home, do not give them what's called permission for a search. So if you've, sometimes they'll present something as if like they're not, as if it's an order, but it's not really an order. They're asking for your permission. So the reason why you want to say if they're in your home, I do not consent to a search, is because later on, if they find something and they want to use it against you in a criminal proceeding, then your lawyer can say that you didn't consent to the search if they didn't have a warrant when they came. That's why you want to say that. So, a few things to keep in mind. If you're at home, you're not even required to confirm your name or provide ID. And this is especially important to note if you live in a house where there are people with different immigration statuses, particularly if there are people who don't have lawful immigration status. So now I'm going to ask Masuma to come up and join me. We're going to do a little role play. I'm going to pretend to be an FBI agent, and Masuma is going to be at her home minding her business. So pay attention, see what you think goes well and what doesn't.
So we're gonna have to share the mic. Share the mic. Yeah. Okay. So. No.
Hi, is Masuma home?
Yes, I'm Masuma.
Hi, this is Naz Ahmed from the FBI. I just had a few questions. Do you mind if I come in?
Yeah, you know what? Come in, have some tea.
Oh, thank you. I'm on a diet, so I'm like trying to avoid anything sugary. You make your tea with sugar, right?
We have Splenda, many options. Please, come in. We're very hospitable.
Thank you. Masuma, I just had a few questions. You're not in any trouble or anything. I don't want you to worry. Do you know someone named Tariq Ismail?
Tariq, yeah, actually, I know him really well, Tariq Ismail.
Yeah, do you know where he's from?
Yeah, he's actually from my neighborhood back in Pakistan.
So do you go to the lectures that he puts on?
Yeah, I even record them on my phone sometimes to review later.
Oh, you have them on your phone right now?
Yes.
Do you mind if could you share them with me?
Yeah, sure. Can I get your email?
Do you have an iPhone?
Yes.
Maybe you could airdrop them to me.
Okay.
Do you mind if I just, look in your, I just want to see, is he on your, sorry. I can't seem to find his TikTok page. Can you show it to me?
Yeah. Oh, his TikTok is great. Wait till you see it.
Great.
All right. And scene.
And see it.
Thank you, Masuma. So, did anything go well here? No. What went wrong? Everything. Okay, yes. Let's be a little bit more specific.
It's okay.
Yes, she let me come in. What else? Sorry? Yeah, she answered all of my questions. She admitted to knowing Tariq. What else? Yeah, she said where they're both from. That's important information. I didn't say this earlier, but and I didn't say that I was an ICE agent, but if you're interacting with an ICE agent and you admit that you weren't born in the United States, then the burden basically shifts to you to prove that you're in the United States with immigration status. What else did she do that wasn't that great? Yeah, she showed me her phone. She let me search through her phone functionally. What else? She didn't ask for a warrant, right? Anything else that she could have done better? Oh, I don't know why, to be honest. I was just thinking, oh, it's a large file. Sending large files over AirDrop is a lot easier than emailing them.
She didn't ask for ID, your ID.
Yeah, she didn't ask for my ID, so she doesn't even know that I'm actually an FBI agent. That's something that a lot of people get concerned about, rightfully so, is like, I don't know who you are. You could be saying you're an FBI agent, but could be somebody else who's just trying to rob me or something. She gave her name. Yeah, you guys identified everything. So she opened the door, she didn't ask for ID, she answered all of my questions, she let me look in her phone. Yes? Yeah, so this is the, thank you in the back, saying that she was afraid. And that's really important to remember, that these are very fraught situations. Even somebody who knows what to do or has thought about what to do or has even attended one of these workshops will in the moment feel worried and scared, and that's normal, because all of a sudden it's like, why are you here? Why are you interested in me? Why do you want to talk to me? Am I going to get in trouble? Am I going to get arrested? Even if you haven't done anything wrong, there's that worry, right? And that's why actually keeping the door closed is not just the safest thing to do, but the thing that is going to make you feel the most protected, because you're not directly interacting with them and you're not having to ask them to leave your home. So, yes? Yeah, and that's, they will use thank you, sorry. She was saying that Muslim was feeling obliged to comply with me. And that's also an important thing, right? Because they're trained interrogators. They're trained in how to get information from people. So they will approach you in whatever way they think will get the information from you. So they might be nice to you, or they might be aggressive to you if they think that's going to work with you. That's all really important to remember. So, a few important things. Yes? Sorry? Yes. Oh, the question is, can you record the conversation? So, it depends on what state you're in. I should know this about Texas, but I don't. If you're in a state that allows what's called one-party consent, then yes, you don't need to ask their permission to record them. But we always advise people to be mindful of their safety when they're doing so. So if you're in plain view of them and you need to reach into your pocket to grab your phone, either tell them that that's what you're doing, or just be more careful about it, because you don't want them to think that you're going for a weapon or something like that. We've all seen and heard lots of scary stories, so just be mindful about that. One thing also important to remember is, even if they come to your door, they knock on your door, and you forget yourself for a moment, but then 2 minutes have passed and you're like, oh no, I know what to do. You can assert your rights then. You can ask them to leave, you can stop answering questions, you can do that at any time. The thing is also, even if it doesn't feel like it, you have a lot of power in the situation, because they know that they can't force you to talk to them. They know that you answering their questions is really up to you. Be ready to repeat yourself. They're not going to politely just go away as soon as you say, I don't want to talk to you without my lawyer present. They're going to try to put pressure on you in different ways. So be ready to repeat yourself. You have to almost act as if you're not hearing what they're saying. You just have to keep on saying those things. And then try to be observant. After, write down what you remember about when they came and what kind of car they might have been in, that sort of thing. And you can contact us or another lawyer. Like I said, I'm in New York and based in New Jersey. Sorry, yes?
What kind of lawyer you are?
What kind of lawyer am I?
Lawyer.
What kind of lawyer should you call? So ideally you should call a lawyer who has experience doing this. If you call us and we're not able to represent you, we'll try to connect you with somebody who can. In the past, we've really not represented people outside of New York or New Jersey, but we've, in the past few years, come to represent more and more people actually in Texas and other places. So it really just depends on the level of what's the right word, harassment you might be facing in terms of what we can do for you. So if, for example, they issue you a grand jury subpoena that's not necessarily, and you're in Texas, that's not necessarily something I would be able to represent you with, but if the FBI does come to your door, you should feel free to call us, and we'll have our contact information up after this. Yes? Yes, our services are for free. Yes?
I don't think you want to use the government appointed or the court appointed lawyer after the court.
So the comment was about using government-appointed lawyers or the public defenders. And I will admit that having a public defender can be a mixed bag. In some cases, it's totally fine, and in other cases, it's not, and it's hard to know upfront what will end up happening. I'm not what's considered a government-appointed lawyer or a public defender. Our organization is completely funded by foundations and grants and donations from people. So,
What kind of lawyer should you hire?
So usually in these circumstances, a criminal defense lawyer is probably your best bet. Although again, they're not some of them might not necessarily know or appreciate the distinctions, but we're a resource for you. Yes.
So after what she did, can she trace back?
So the question was, after the disaster, can she trace back? So are you saying
What should she do? Call a lawyer?
Yes, you should still call a lawyer. What might happen in that circumstance is the lawyer would call the agent to see what interest they have in Mosuma, and then most likely the FBI would not show up again. Sometimes that does happen. They do show up, just depending on who they're investigating and what they're interested in. But that it's still important, even after that, to call a lawyer to get them involved. All kind of hope is not lost if you've done like Mosuma did earlier. Any other questions? Okay. So now I would like a volunteer from the audience. Somebody to come up and do it better than Mosuma. So, oh yes, please. Thank you. I was worried nobody was going to volunteer.
Do you prefer to sit or stand? Do you prefer to sit or stand? Stand, okay. Hi. Okay, so I know your name.
So, hello, is Ashraf there?
Yes, I am Ashraf. Who are you?
My name's Naz. I'm with the FBI. Can I come in, please?
No, I'm sorry, Naz. I cannot let you in right now.
It's really humid out here. I would appreciate getting out of the heat. Do you mind if I come in? It's just, you're not in any trouble. It's going to take a few minutes.
There is a refrigerator in my garage. You can take some water from there, but I'm not going to let you in.
I'm all good on water. I have my Yeti tumbler with me. You're not in any trouble, really. It's going to be like 5 minutes. Don't you want to protect your community, Ashraf?
Yes, and that is the reason why I'm not letting you in my house.
Ashraf, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. If you don't let me in, I can come back with a bunch of agents and FBI jackets, and your neighbors can see that. Is that what you want?
No, I really don't want that, but then I don't know who you are. So can you slide your card under the door and provide some proper identification?
It would be a lot easier for me to show you my ID if I was allowed in the house. It's like I said, it's really not. You're not in any trouble. It's just going to take a few minutes.
My door fortunately has a little sliding window, and I can open that, and you can show me your card through that. There's a grill on the little window, and you can just show me your card through that.
Okay, but what are you going to do with my information?
make sure you are who you say you are.
Okay, well, I guess we're gonna do it the hard way. Here's my card. Can we give a round of applause for Usher?
Thank you.
That was so. What did Usher do better than Masuma? Everything. Didn't let her in. Yes. One. What else?
Over in the garage of the house.
Offered to go in the garage. Yes. What else? She asked for ID. Yeah, to prove that I am who I say I am. What else? Showed resistance. Yes. Polite resistance. What else? Yeah, she was not scared. Obviously, it helped that she had all of you cheering her. Yes. Yes, don't mess with Usher. Obviously, it helped that she had all of you cheering her on, and ideally, in these situations, we would all have a backdrop of people who have our backs, but sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes we're alone at home. But yes, hopefully we can all show as much spine as Usher did. Yes. Yes.
Do you have to identify yourself? For example, like is Usher a home? Could Usher say Usher's not home? Or is that?
You don't even have to, yeah, like I said, you don't have to confirm your name. So she didn't technically have to do that, but it's, you know, and some, it's fine if you're not, if you're not undocumented or you're not worried about your status, you can identify yourself if you feel comfortable doing so. Yes.
So giving access to the garage, is that not part of the home?
So it is part of the home, but it means that they would only have permission to enter the garage. And so this is a good lawyer question, but it wouldn't mean that they would then like have permission to enter the rest of the house. Yes?
Can they implant anything in the garage when you open the garage?
The question is, can they implant something in the garage? So one important thing to keep in mind throughout all of this is that there are a lot of things that they are not supposed to do that they end up doing. So there are lots of stories of police officers planting drugs on people, on things like that. I have not experienced the FBI planting evidence on somebody. It's not, I always go back to like, what is this in this person's interest, self-interest. If they have the interest of, I want to get this person, I want to make sure that they go to jail, they are also very mindful that somebody else is going to be watching what they do. And so, and they know, like now people have a lot of cameras, so they might, it's possible, but I don't think it's very likely. Oh, would they plant a recording device? No, they need special permission from a court to do that. Yes.
Yeah, so once they identify themselves, let's say, and you like, oh, I'm FBI, yes, I have a warrant, they say no, let's say, can you just stop engaging? Can you say, okay, bye, and leave the door?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, once they
Or they like do not have citizenship, would it be a federal offense to lie and say like, oh, so and so's not here?
So the question is about if there is somebody in the house who doesn't have immigration status, and you get asked if that person is there. It's very unlikely that the answer to that question would cause them to bring charges against you unless it was made evident to you, like, we're looking for this person to arrest them, instead of just, oh, like, we have some questions for this person. I wouldn't advise it. I would just not answer the question. And that's also a very strange thing to do, right? Like, it's almost like Pavlovian response of, I answer questions that are put to me, but you kind of have to pretend like you're in a one-way conversation with just yourself. Like, I'm not giving you any information. The only information I'm going to extract from you is your name and business card or your phone number. Yes? Sorry, do you mind repeating yourself? Oh, do they give gag orders? No, usually a gag order comes in place when if there's a court proceeding and the judge in that proceeding, in that trial, has said that the people involved in the trial can't speak about it. Yeah. Yes?
Maybe it's a question of tomorrow's session, but when we are talking about ID, can we ask for their ID while at the airport?
Oh, the question is about for ID at the airport. Yeah, we'll go through that tomorrow. They don't usually give ID at the airport, and they do everything they can to try to hide their ID at the airport. Yes?
So, you said that they can't search your house without a warrant, but can they search your car or like your backyard or like your cabana or your porch without a warrant?
So yes, the question is, can they search your car or your backyard or cabana without a warrant? So this is getting into like technical legal doctrine, but let's say, not that this would necessarily happen, but let's say in your front yard there's something that's open to the public that anybody can see, and for some reason somebody has left out guns in the front yard. That would then probably give them justification to go and search the backyard. So anything that is what's called in plain view, something that they saw a gun in your car, for example. Did you have a question?
So what if like anyone's acting to be like someone who's trying to check your house, they're actually not trying to like attack your family, like self-defense, or like keep them out of your house?
Can you use self-defense to kick them? I would not advise using any physical force to get them out of your house. Yes. So are they allowed to come to your work? To your work and... Yeah, they come repeatedly to your work. So, yeah, unfortunately, they don't have restrictions on where they can go to ask you questions. It is a tactic that they use to go to people's work, to put pressure on them, either because they want them to feel like, oh, you're here at work, so you can't go anywhere, and you're not in your home where you're most protected, and because maybe they want you to feel like your coworkers are watching you. What are you going to do when the FBI shows up? That sort of thing. You should definitely get a lawyer involved if they showed up to your work more than once. Yeah, so the question is, should you be worried that they're looking at you? So, in my experience, if they are seriously looking at you to bring charges against you, like very seriously looking at you to bring charges against you, they are not actually going to directly approach you. They're going to approach people around you. They're not going to approach you directly because there are a lot of protections that they have to follow for somebody that they think they're going to charge with a crime. Yes?
I have a question. Are we obliged to give the social media passwords upon arrival at the airport?
Very good question.
But they ask me all the time when I come.
You are not obliged to do anything related to your phone other than prove that it's a phone. So you're not obliged to unlock your phone, you're not obliged to give your social media passwords, you're not obliged to pull up anything from your phone for them. Yes?
So if they come to your house for the first time and you tell them to leave and not come back and they leave, but then they constantly come back, are they allowed to do that?
So yeah, unfortunately, until you're arrested and tell them, I'm not going to speak to you without a lawyer present, they theoretically, it's not a violation of any law or anything for them to come back to your home. That's also why it's important to get a lawyer involved. Not that having a lawyer involved will necessarily prevent that, but usually, not in all cases, but usually once a lawyer gets involved, they go through the lawyer and they don't come directly to you.
I have the microphone.
Yes.
Sorry. So is it a safe practice to just say, I don't answer questions? I don't answer questions. I don't answer questions. Or like a little child that says, why? 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 Like that.
That's a completely reasonable thing to say. I also just, it has to be comfortable for you to say. Some people don't feel comfortable saying, I don't want to talk to you. So I tell them, well, you can say, my lawyer said I shouldn't talk to you, or I don't feel comfortable answering questions without a lawyer present, right? Because it's conveying to them that there's a possibility in this world in which you might answer their questions, but you're only going to do it if you feel safe. Yes?
If they have a search warrant, for instance. So if they do have a search warrant,
Yes.
How does one handle themselves? So they storm inside the house. What are my rights then? Do you have a role play for that by any chance?
No role play, but the most important thing I would say if they have a search warrant is you still don't have to answer their questions. And it's actually extremely important at that point that you do not answer their questions.
So if they ask you, do you have a gun in the house? You don't point, you don't tell them that, hey, I do have a gun in the house and it's in my cabinet?
That's one, I think, important exception. I don't, I'd have to think about that, to be honest. But everything else, if they start to ask you questions about anything else, please, 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 never answer questions without a lawyer if they're executing a search warrant at your house. Even if it's as mundane about, like, where do you go to school, or where does your kid go to school, or things like that. You might need to tell them things for health reasons, right? Like if you have medication that you need to take, or somebody needs to be picked up from school or something like that. But other than that, do not answer any questions.
Also, if they don't have a search warrant, they come to my house, I don't even have to ask them to speak to my lawyer, because I can just tell them I'm not interested in talking to you, right?
Yeah.
Or do I have to give them the details of my attorney?
No, you don't have to give them the details of a lawyer. You don't have to say, I'm not going to speak to you without a lawyer present. You can refuse to speak with them and they might go away. The reason you might want to get a lawyer involved is if they come back. If they say they're going to come back and they do end up coming back. I think there's
If they do have a search warrant, are they allowed to force their way into your house?
Yes, I mean, I think you should just assume that if they have a search warrant, they're going to do whatever they can to get into your house. I think there's... Yes?
I know you said you don't have to give any passcode or anything from your phone, but the first response is they're going to keep your phone, until they do whatever they need to do.
Yes, that's a good question and something we'll go over more tomorrow. The short answer to that is they can keep your phone whether you unlock it for them or not. I've had clients who've unlocked their phones for them and they've kept the phone. I've had clients who've refused to unlock the phone and the phone is not seized and they leave with the phone. So.
Would they also sometimes go with the approach of like sending an official letter? I mean, if they send, what do we have to do? I mean, are we obliged to attend any scheduled, meeting that they have?
Oh, so yeah, you're talking about sometimes they might send a letter that says we would like to interview you at our office on such and such date and such time.
Yes.
No, but you should get a lawyer involved, especially if it looks like what's called a grand jury subpoena. Definitely get a lawyer involved. You don't need to oblige if it's just a letter from them, from the FBI that says show up at our office. But if it says show up at a courthouse and you have to testify, definitely get a lawyer involved.
So we don't have to attend?
No, you're never obliged to speak with them. If I can convey one thing, you are 100% never obliged to speak to them. The only instance in which that might not be the case is if you receive what is called a grand jury subpoena, and that's an order from a court compelling you to come and provide testimony. And in that circumstance, your lawyer might decide that it's best for you to speak with them instead of testifying before the grand jury.
So, like, what if the FBI just wants to kill you for no reason? Can you do self-defense?
What if the FBI wants to kill? No, I mean, so again, I would very strongly caution you against anything physical, and I say that because several years ago, there was a young man who was being questioned about the Boston Marathon bombing. He knew the two brothers, and he was being questioned in his apartment by the two FBI agents. And he ended up being killed by them, unfortunately. They said that he made movements as if he was going to get a weapon, but he was shot and killed, I think. It's not impossible that you would feel as if they're going to do something like that to you, but I would just very strongly caution against using anything related to physical force. Okay, I think my time is up, but I will be here again. I'm obviously here the rest of the day. You can.
Assalamualaikum, Sister. Just one quick question. First of all, thank you so much for a very informative and very wise advices that you have given. May Allah bless you for all what you have done, and may Allah protect you, inshallah. I just have a quick question on the taking the fifth. What are the implications of taking the fifth if you are actually, receive a summon for a grand jury, and then what happens beyond, how many times can you take the fifth before, you have to basically answer anything at all?
So yes, taking the fifth is kind of a technical, complicated thing, but basically, so the grand jury subpoena thing I was talking to you about, if you get subpoenaed and you decide I'm going to plead the fifth in front of the grand jury, then it's up to the prosecutor to decide I'm going to challenge this person's claim that giving answers would incriminate them. And then you have to go before a judge basically to prove that you are properly invoking the Fifth Amendment, and the judge decides whether you would be implicating yourself in criminal activity if you testified. And if the judge decides that you wouldn't be, then the judge will order you to testify. And if you don't testify, if you continue to plead the fifth, then you could face jail. That's a very short, condensed answer. But thank you everyone so much. Again, I'll be here. We have our pamphlets, and I'll have my business cards.
Thank you so much, Salawat, for Sister Naz Ahmed. Thank you so much for providing such a wonderful presentation for our community, which I think, as we all know, is a needed topic to discuss. And inshallah, we will get the wonderful opportunity to hear from her again tomorrow during the first half of our session, in which she will cover flying while Muslim. So we had a lot of questions today regarding cell phones and what to do at the airport, and she will go into much more detail about that tomorrow. So I highly recommend you all come back for that. And I think it's always great to do a couple takeaways before we move on to our next presentation. So, as I think one of the main things that we can understand from this presentation is that because the law enforcement often uses these kinds of techniques for phishing, as was shared with us, right? We are often as strong individually as we are strong as a community. So take what you've learned here today, encourage others to look at CLEAR's website. CLEAR is the organization that Naz works for. They have a lot of this information on their website. They also have contact information if you know anyone who is experiencing something like this, and if they live in New York or New Jersey, might be represented by her organization or can be referred out. They have a long list of referrals for lawyers in different states. But so definitely encourage others to learn about this and share what you've learned here today. And in terms of what we've learned here today, can I get anyone to quickly recap for me what the first golden rule was? Show ID, okay. So that was I think in somewhere couched to number 2. Does anyone remember number 1? Don't open the door. Thank you. So number 1. So we can all say this together. Rule number 1. don't open the door. Very good. Rule, and this is helpful because we don't want this to be the first time that you actually verbalize this, if this is ever, God forbid, happening to you. So let's verbalize it today so that we know what to do. So rule number 1, don't open the door. Does anyone remember rule number 2? Yeah, don't speak to law enforcement. Don't speak. So let's say that all together. Rule number 2, don't speak to law enforcement. Very good. And then if they are in the home, what is rule number 3? Call the lawyer is a good couched in that. Couched into that. Does anyone remember rule number 3? No? Wow, already, guys? I mean, it's not even been an hour. I have no hope for you all. No. Yes, please go ahead. Yeah, that's couched under it. You don't need to confirm your name or show ID. The youth, ladies and gentlemen, the youth of our generation are going to save us. Yes, please do not consent to a search. That's number 3. So that's rule number 3. So those are the 3 golden rules, and inshallah, if we can remember them ourselves and teach them to others, that'll be very important. We went into some of the distinction between what happens when you're in a land where there is no search warrant, right? And these rules are very applicable, very different, right? Don't talk, don't consent, don't show ID, be a child, like say Aga Ali had just said, right? Just say, I don't answer questions. Now, if you are in a search warrant, that's a different situation, right? Really good to get a lawyer involved. And definitely make a phone call to NASA organization or a criminal defense lawyer and the like. So those are kind of the 2 boxes you can be in. Okay, wonderful. So with that, we will move on to our next presentation. We have with us today a wonderful second panelist, Sayyid Ali Tawfiq. He is a Hawza-educated Islamic scholar and U.S.-trained attorney. After finishing high school, he moved from his hometown in Maryland to Iran to study Islamic studies and jurisprudence at Jamiatul Mustafa in Qom. Prior to starting Dars Kharij, he returned to his hometown and completed his Juris Doctorate at George Washington Law School. He currently divides his attention and location between Oakland, California, Maryland, and Houston, Texas. He is licensed to practice law in 5 states, Maryland, Texas, California, DC, and New Jersey. And his primary focus lies in the intersection of Islamic and American law. He currently works at Open Door Legal, a legal aid organization that serves and is based in the lowest income neighborhoods of San Francisco. He is also the founder of Legal Connect PLLC, a private law firm providing estate planning, asset protection, and immigration legal services. So we're very lucky to have another wonderful speaker join us today. Today he will be presenting on Islamic, well, he can go into this in detail, but Islamic wills. And the legal system. And inshallah, tomorrow too, he will also return for more information about wills, trusts, probates, and estates. So inshallah, with that, and a round of salawat, please.
Interesting thing, around the salawat. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It is an honor and pleasure to be here, and inshallah to give the sadaqah of my knowledge in the form of this presentation, and many to come, inshallah. So I'm going to ask for a couple volunteers. I already have 2 volunteers to pass out these word sheets over here. Inshallah, it's going to be 1 for every 2 people. And I'm going to be moving very fast, and so I'm going to be demanding everyone's attention. Okay? So just a general roadmap. We have 4 sections to complete. Section number 1, Islamic inheritance. Part 2, state law. 3, completing your forms. And 4, feedback. And what I mean by completing your forms is, if you come to tomorrow's session, you will probably walk away with a valid American will. You can fill it out here and have it witnessed by 2 people next to you, as long as they're not your family. But today we're only going to be working on part 1, Islamic inheritance. And while Sister Naz was talking about the evils of this dunya, I'll be talking about the wrath of God if you do not comply with Islamic inheritance. So moving on, there's just one just quick heads up but in this context, heads down. I mean, there are going to be a couple slides that are going to say heads down, heads up. I would please request everyone not to open the packets. I know that everyone wants to just go through them. No. Close those packets. When I say heads down, you can look down at your packets. When I say heads up, you look at me and you pay attention to the screen, okay? Great. All right. So, moving on to the first section. So this is more of a doctrine, which is more theory. We have this thing called the dead hand control doctrine versus God's hand, which is my version of this. Next slide, please. So, in the American system, you have the dead hand, which means you are dead, but you have 100% legal authority to transfer your assets. Asset is another word for your stuff, to whoever you wish. The 100% authority, that means your children, your neighbors, your cats, your dogs, charity, wherever you like, 100% control. Now, this is an American concept, and of course other states, other countries in the world too, but it's not that everywhere is like this. Next, please. Now, we have God's hand, which limits our dead hand to 1/3. So, you have permission up to 1/3 of what you have to direct it wherever you like. The rest of it has a fixed portion. Okay? If you do not use this dead hand and you'd like to leave it all up to God, that's actually even better. But, of course, Allah loves this concept of wasiyah. And so this is a great place to make a distinction between wasiyah and will. So Allah says you have the option to do a wasiyah, min ba'd wasiyatin yusa biha aw dayn, which means your will, your wasiyah, is only up to 1/3. Now the reason why, God's will, the reason why I call it God's will is because He uses the word yusikumullahu fi awladikum as it goes on. So Allah does this wasiyat upon you all, which includes that 1/3. That's more of a technical thing. So He has this will upon you, and you have that, this whole predestination versus some, authority. That's, you have 1/3 when it comes to inheritance. All right, next. So heads down, everybody. So we have this first page. Now we're going to move on to the second page, page 2 and 3. We're just going to have a little conversation, or just a brief explanation here. Now, these 2 pages are relatively self-explanatory in the sense that you can read it and understand it easily. The purpose of these 2 pages is to understand what is an Islamic will, what is an American will. So an Islamic will, I'm going to read this fast because we don't have as much time. It's known as a wasiyah, a document that outlines how a Muslim's assets and property should be distributed after their death in accordance with Islamic law, also known as Sharia. Islamic wills are not legally binding documents in all countries, but they are considered a religious obligation for Muslims. Where do we get this from? This verse in the Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت إن ترك خيرا الوصية للوالدين والأقربين بالمعروف حقا على المتقين. حقا على المتقين.
It'll help you throughout the presentation to
it's
kind of
important,
follow along.
obligation.
Right. You can also
Now, there's this point that I already mentioned about the whole 1/3 and God's hand, dead hand doctrine. And anything more than 1/3 will be automatically reduced by law. So let's say I decide to give $100,000 in my wasiyah to some family member, and then I only have $200,000 in my estate. It gets reduced. And there's that one block about the differences in schools of thought, very important. The difference between the Jafari school of thought and the non-Jafari. We, in general, allow us to supplement or add portions for those who already have a fixed portion. Okay, you can read that on your own time. What is an American will? Now, 2 paragraphs. Number 1, the American will is a legal document that allows you to specify how your assets and property should be distributed after your death. Very similar, right? But this will is governed by state law, so every state is different. We don't really have federal laws that govern how your stuff is supposed to be transferred. It also includes who to act as an executor of your estate and other special instructions. And then, what happens when you have a will? When you have a will, that executor that you have named takes it to court, probate court. You're going to hear this term a lot, probate court. Okay? which I like to consider the living hell on earth for a lot of states, especially the state of California. It will oversee the distribution of your assets and take you through that living hell. And then the next section you have what to include in Islamic will, which you have 3 sections: religious obligations, financial debts, nominations. Pretty self-explanatory. If we have questions, we can have them afterwards. Sorry, I had to zoom through that. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right, heads up, everybody. Yeah, heads up. 7 up. Next. Okay, so today we're going to simulate what happens when you die today. So I'm pretty sure you've all heard that statement, die before you die. And they say that Ayatollah Hassan Zada Almani said there are 70 different versions that this can be interpreted. I'm pretty sure this is not one of those 70 that he was thinking about. But we're going to simulate your death and how people are going to inherit your properties. And not just property, there's more. Your debts. So first thing is your debts are going to be separated. Second, whatever you want in your wasiyah. Third, Allah's distribution. So go, please. So calculate your debts, step 1. Step 2, instruct your loved ones on your wasiyah. Step 3, observe your family's rights. Next slide. Okay, we have this whole thing up here. Next. Heads down. Just stay right here. All right, so page 4. I'm hoping everybody has pens and pencils for this workshop. Thank you. I would like everyone to write down their debts, their instructions, and go through these steps. We're going to set a timer. Everybody has 2 minutes to write their debts. We all live in America. We have a lot of debts.
Yeah, of course. Do you know where the extra mic is? The extra mic. We do have one, but do you know where it is? Mm-hmm. Okay. Is it going to cause feedback? Just in case we need to moderate.
So I want you to include both your financial debts and your religious debts. So your prayers, your fasts, those things that were on the previous page. If Hajj was wajib on you, then you include that. If you don't, if it wasn't wajib on you, then it's not a debt.
Agali, can you share that we have some extra worksheets? So in case anyone needs an extra worksheet, they can ask, they can raise their hand. We have a couple, unless...
We have a few more copies of the worksheet. Raise your hand, and it'll be first come first. There we go. 1, 2. Okay, you have 30 more seconds.
Hi. Can you deliver this? Do you see the lady with her hand raised? Do you mind taking this to her? Is it okay? Okay. If anyone raises their hand, can you give them one?
Okay, we're moving on to step 2. Instruct your loved ones. This is the wasiyah portion. So, who you want to give what to. Now, I'm going to add something that 50. These bottom 2 rows are in-laws. Okay. I don't see everyone drawing. Doesn't matter, no, everyone. What do you mean paternal side? There's a lot of people? Well, it's okay, you don't have to write all their names. You can write their initials, just write, okay, there's like 3 aunts. Yeah. Good question. The ones who are alive or everyone? I want you to write, draw on everyone, and then put an X on those who are not around. Yeah, we've all been getting Amber Alerts the past 2 days. Sorry? Not yet. I'm just waiting for the timer. Okay. Next. Now we're going to talk about step 3, which is God's will. In other words, Islamic inheritance distributions. And since I don't want anyone to come and say that we haven't read the Quran or know that Allah has put inheritance rules in the Quran, because we are going to be reading them together. The rules of inheritance in the Quran, we'll be reading them together verbatim. Next. We're going to continue on this worksheet. Go back, please. We're going to continue on this worksheet. There's multiple pages we're going to be addressing, one at a time. The first is the spousal degree, page 7. And the instructions, please read them very carefully. It says you circle 1. Circle 1 of one letter in the scenario that applies to your spouse. Okay? So, if you were to die today, what would your husband or wife inherit? You should be circling 1, not both. Your husband or wife. And just a little clarification here. If you are the husband, you're working on the wife section. Okay? Just a little ambiguity there. If you have any questions, raise your hands. I have a couple volunteers who will be helping people fill these out. We have a lot more worksheets in the front too. Okay, I'm gonna circle around with them. There you go. Just help people to just understand that. I'm gonna take another sheet for myself. You need worksheets? Okay. Take one, please. Okay. Good. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. Just a quick question on the first one. After the option B, it's written after the payment of a bequest, you may have bequest or a debt. Can you please explain a little bit more about this one?
Absolutely. So that's the verse. I didn't want to take that part out, but that's basically referring to steps 1 and 2. So right now we're in steps 3. Well, step 3 that says who inherits what. But step 1 and 2 was the wasiyah and the debt. So once you take out the debts and then you take out your wasiyah, then these rules apply. Does that make sense? Next question, yes?
Maybe after the 1/3, then I can decide about what I want to do with my property, right?
You can only decide up to 1/3.
And that's after that 1/3?
Yes, after that 1/3, this all applies. Now, if you don't use that 1/3, it doesn't matter. This applies. Okay.
Just to add on to that question, so
Yes.
this means that my debts, which could be any number, potentially the majority of my estate, will go out first.
Yep.
That's 90% of my assets.
Exactly.
And then my wasiyah, which would be 1/3 of it, if I have that much. And then whatever is left at that point, then I would, for example, I would say, I have a husband and a child, so that's option B, he gets 1/4.
Exactly. And so we're actually going to be using a few people in the audience as examples. So you shared yours, which means you gave your consent to give your information, where you have a husband and your child. So 1/4 is the right answer. Anyone want to share their circumstance that is not that one?
I recently went to a state to put my life in a state with using Islamic rules, and actually I printed those ayahs, translated them, and took them to the lawyer, to the state person who like the state for you, and it cost a lot of money to get the state.
Yes.
At least in my state is that. And then after we went through the whole process of a state, including my wife, and I have children and grandchildren, and which is Islam. And these are the rules. Actually, I wrote this down by my own, calling different scholars and reading Quran myself, which actually I'm translating Quran. I took it to them. I said, this is it. They were not respecting that at all.
Yeah.
So I said, well, if I'm not happy to sign this, or what is my option? He says, well, it's decide your happiness. So I had to, convince my wife and my children and talk to them that, after I die, if I die first or my wife die first, whichever, I would like this thing to be applied. So as a part of the state, there was a will inside.
So this is a great question for tomorrow, because we're going to talk about how you can actually implement that in this country. So right now we're only talking about an Islamic system. What does Allah want people, what are your family's rights of inheritance? That's all we're talking about today, but we'll save that for tomorrow because there's a lot to talk about with wills and trusts and ownership and transfers. Inshallah, we'll talk about that tomorrow.
So there's a complication with the trust.
We'll talk about that tomorrow, inshallah. Thank you. Okay, can I have one of the, what we talked about, one of the husbands to tell me what their ratios are for their wife? Okay, someone said 1/8, and that is because you have a child. Perfect. Alhamdulillah. May Allah protect them all. Okay, moving on to the first degree worksheet of parents, page 8. I'm going to mention something interesting right here, and I'm going to leave you all in suspense. There is an extremely, well, I'm going to say controversial because of the way we're raised in this society, controversial ruling when it comes to spouses inheriting from one another. And if we have time, then I'll share it with you all at the end of the session. But let's just say there's going to be quite some people will walk out angry after this. We'll leave that at the end of the session if there is time. So, worksheet 1, page 8, first degree. If your parents are living, you will be putting their portions. If your mother is not around or your father is not around, Allah bless them, but they will not be having any sort of inheritance rules. You have 1 minute. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 That's a good, yeah, I should do that. Okay, can I get a volunteer to tell me their scenario? One right here, yes. Yes. Okay, if your mother and father are no longer in this world, that means 0 for them. Yeah. That is, yeah. Anyone? Yes? Okay. You have option C. Yeah. And why is that? Tell me about your family tree that makes option C your option. She has brothers, okay. Sorry, you have brothers. He or she, okay, this is an important thing. It's a pronoun situation. If he or she has brothers, that means you, the person who's passing away. If you die and you have brothers, then your mom receives less. Yes. If you have what? Children and brothers? Well, if you have children, then you're not C anyways, you're A. Only one of those applies to you. Yeah.
So my mom is not alive, my father is alive. So
that would be option A. If your father is alive and your mother is not alive, well, do you have children? Yes, so yes, A, option A. Okay.
Can you stay in the center?
Yeah.
First or second, somebody asks a question. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. I will repeat the question as it is asked. If someone does not have their mother living, but their father is living, then they are option A. And they have children, sorry. And final volunteer? Brothers. Yes. Although there's a very small caveat here. Do you have 2 sisters in addition to a brother? I have 1 sister, 1 brother. Okay, so no. Then you would not be C. You would be B. Perfect. All right. If you have 2 sisters and a brother, then you qualify as brothers. It's an interesting ruling. I do not want to confuse people, but I'm just putting this out there. So your mother's portion would be 1/6, whether or not you have children. Okay, moving on to the next one. Now this one is a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to ask for you all to converse amongst yourselves to figure this out. Again, you're going to circle one letter that applies to you, and I'm just going to give one hint. If you have a son or sons, you're option A. Don't go to B and C. Okay? Okay, I'm going to give 3 scenarios myself. Scenario number 1. I have 3 daughters, which I do not. I have 0. I have 3 daughters. What is their inheritance? Is it A, B, or C? Let's start with that. B. So how much do they receive? If they are women, فإن كن نساء فوق اثنتين فلهن ثلث ما ترك. They will have 2/3 of the inheritance. So 2/3 will be split amongst the daughters. Make sense? Yeah. Now, another scenario. I have 1 son, 3 daughters. I have none of those. It'll be... Actually, let's use a scenario down here. We have 3 sons and 1 daughter. So you put 2 tallies, and it becomes 2 out of 7 for each son, and 1 out of 7 for each female. And what happens if you have 1 daughter? Half. Lucky, yes. Now there is a difference in opinion as to how many daughters or daughter the Holy Prophet passed away with, but it becomes very relevant for our controversial topic, inshallah. Okay, we're going to move on to page 10, which is just a summary worksheet. And this summary is just everything you've already seen, and you're just going to put them all together. This is just for calculation purposes. And you'll notice most of you, sorry, I was told to be in the center. Most of you will not calculate the numbers to reach 100%. If you add the numbers up, most times they will not be 100%. And there are rules for those. We will not be talking about them in this workshop. So for example, if you have 1 daughter and 1 wife, what is the portion? It is 1/8 plus 1/2. That's 5/8. What happens to the rest of it? I'm not going to tell you. Now the only thing you just need to keep in mind is if you circled A for this last one, you're going to do everyone first, and then the rest of it just gets split amongst the children. Okay, moving on. Page 11, which is the miscellaneous rules of inheritance, is the last page for today. In this condensed version of this workshop, there are a few categories that we have disqualifications, which means that if they are in any of these categories, they are considered dead to you. Not dead to you, dead to God, for inheritance purposes. Number 1, children born out of wedlock. Well, both ways. So parents do not receive from the children that are out of wedlock, and vice versa. There's a lot of wisdom behind this. Some of us may feel like, well, that's unfair. There is a wisdom. We'll leave that for a different time. The second is the Slayer doctrine. And I say the Slayer doctrine because this is an American concept as well. You can't kill the person you're inheriting from unless you get away with it. Okay? As long as you're not guilty, you can inherit. That's pretty much most of law in the first place. And then the third is non-Muslim. Non-Muslims are generally not entitled to inherit from a Muslim under Islamic law. This means you can give from that wasiyah portion to, let's say, your non-Muslim family member or your non-Muslim friend. But they do not inherit from the 2/3 minimum that Allah has put. Okay? And I'm just going to throw another thing in here, which is there are a lot of incentives to becoming Muslim. And God uses finances as one of those incentives. We see it in the context of inheritance. You'll see it in a lot of other places too. Even to the extent where some say that if the person passes away, you're not Muslim. They haven't distributed. If you come forward and say, I'm Muslim now, you might be entitled to a share. We have a lot of incentives for Islam. And then, of course, the next question of adopted children. Adopted children are not your children for inheritance purposes. One of the wisdoms of this is, if you adopt a child, you don't want them to have severed their ties with their own family. It is something that is sacred in Islam, this whole concept of family. And your biological relationships, you are required to maintain a relationship with them, and you are required to have inheritance pass up and down between them. You can provide for them as part of your wasiyah, but you cannot expect them to be receiving as one of your other children. Yes? One question? Okay. Now, this last portion I love talking about. It's just one of those rules that I thought were really nice to talk about here. This is not in the Quran, this is in part of our hadiths though. Some like to consider this a cultural tradition, but we have this in our hadiths, so it's also in our rulings, where the eldest son of a father receives these 4 items. So the ring, the sword, the family sword, the armor, or clothes as well, and the mushaf, the holy book. You receive these from your father, like a legacy that's kind of passed down. Now it's interesting, whether or not a Glock or a shotgun is included in this, is a conversation that is had between the Maharaja. And the ruling is, Ihtiyat says you have to work it out with the rest of the children. So these are relevant. You may not have a family sword, but you may have other family weapons, or armor as well. So my children are definitely receiving my riding gear. So that is it for this section, and I'm going to take one small, not a break, but next slide please. Okay, I'm going to I'm going to transition into something before we go into questions, because I'm running out of time. The hudud of Allah. We see this principle, we see this term used in the Quran multiple times. These are God's red lines. These are God's boundaries. You pass these boundaries, there are consequences. A lot of us, depending on the culture that we're from, make certain statements that are close to blasphemous, that go directly in violation of God, and we need to be worried about that. So, next slide. Those verses that you have in your worksheets that say the rules of inheritance. يُوصِيكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي أَوْلَادِكُمْ لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ. All the way. These are back-to-back verses. If you open the Quran, Surah Nisa, the first page talks about some stuff. Page 2 and 3 is just listing inheritance rules. Not just the inheritance rules, but it gives a little bit, it's a nicer presentation of it. And at the end of page 3, immediately after it talks about who receives what, Allah he states this verse. Tilka hududullah. These are the red lines or the boundaries or limits set by Allah, and whoever وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ يُدْخِلْهُ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ. So whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger, He will enter him into the gardens beneath which rivers flow. We've heard this verse so many times, like this part of it. We know. You obey, you're going to heaven. Very simple process. خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا وَذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. You will be there forever, and this is the success that we're all looking for. Correct? Nice. Immediately after. وَمَنْ يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَهُ. Whoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger and transgresses His limits, who goes past these boundaries, who adds more of someone's inheritance, who disinherits someone. يُدْخِلْهُ نَارًا خَالِدًا فِيهَا. There's no playing around. You will be admitted into hell forever. Based off of this verse. These are not my words. These are God's words. وَلَهُ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. For something as simple as this. Now you may not understand, you may not think, you may think that this child has been disobedient throughout their life, or this parent, or this brother or sister. But this is not yours to shift around. It's not yours. You need to abide by God's command. Or else, you enter hell. And this happens to me a lot. I do estate plans. Muslim families come to me and they say, I don't want that 2-to-1 ratio for my kids. I want everyone equally. I love them all equally. Well, Allah loves all of you equally too. I can prepare that for you, but you're going to hell. And I say that with a straight face and with such determination because that is Allah's word. So everyone needs to believe it. It happened. 50% of my Muslim clients tell me they don't want to obey. That's crazy. Okay, moving on. Next, please. Right after the verses of the inheritance. Next. Yeah, I'm done. I'm almost done. Almost done, I mean the questions. We already had enough questions. Go back, please. The rest is for tomorrow, or rest for tomorrow's session. They both work. Next. And I really love and appreciate your feedback, so please use this link to have your feedback. I don't have a business card, but you can just scan that QR code to get my contact information, because usually a lot of people ask for my contact information afterwards. So we're going to leave this up, and I'm going to ask I'm going to do a very quick poll, and I'm going to end with this. How many, we're going to do from what states you come from. How many of you are from the state of Texas? Okay, hands down. How many of you are from the state of California? Okay, and the East Coast? Where's everyone else from? Michigan? Illinois? Wisconsin? Oh, Midwest. Okay, got it, cool. The reason I ask this is because tomorrow when I'm bringing the forms where you're going to prepare your wills, there are some states that have statutory forms, which you just fill out yourself. It's like called the California will. And there's the Muslim Congress will, which I will be reading for you all tomorrow, inshallah. Okay, that is all.